Saints fans and who that's from all over the world. It's the Bayou Kickoff show, baby. With Bob Rose and Kyle T. And special guests Mike Detillier and Barry Hirstius.
Happy Wednesday, New Orleans Saints fans, fans of the NFL, and especially fans of the Bayou Blitz. We want to welcome you, or thank you rather, for having us into your homes and over your airwaves again on a Wednesday night. And for this, a very special Wednesday night, as Mr. Mosley said in the promo, this is the Bayou Blitz 2019 season kickoff show. And we want to thank you for all the support that you've given to Kyle and myself over the last 17 months of us doing this show and our second season preview. But more importantly than our show, NFL games are finally going to count this calendar year, and you cannot possibly be any more excited than what your host, Kyle, and myself are this evening. We're really excited to have our special guests, Mike Detillier and Barry Hirstius, joining us in a little bit. But first of all, happy 2019 NFL season to you, Kyle, my friend.
Happy 2019 season to you as well, Bob, and the Who Dat Nation. But most of all, this also marks the 10th season that the Saints News Network has produced podcasts for the Who Dat Nation. Wow! I am excited, man. 10 years, 10 seasons, 10 great times. 10 years that we have had. We've had some great alumni like the professor, as well as Rick Gailey and Snatcher and Diva and the professional. I can go on and on and on. But I'm happy that we're here. And Saints fans, get ready for a great ride in 2019 with our boys in the black and gold.
Well, yeah, for sure. And I want to take a moment to thank you as well. I'm going to start calling you the Jedi Master because you have mentored so many people, so many of my contemporaries that are in the industry, and continue to support them, not to mention all the help and assistance that you have given to me thus far in my early but hopefully long writing career. So thank you, Kyle, so much for everything that you've done for me, for so many others, and especially for the Who Dat New Orleans Saints Nation.
Hey, man, it's nothing but love, baby, nothing but love. You see talent, you got to be able to share, with the world. And I never wanted the Saints News Network to be about me, myself, and I. I always wanted it to be about how an average fan like myself could be there to give important information to the rest of the Who Dat Nation, people who don't have access to it. We have visitors and people who download our podcasts from all over the world, and that's one of the things I say from Saints fans and Who Dats from all over the world. It's true, and I love it, and it's just great to be on the air for 10 seasons.
Yeah, and it's so great that you continue to do this, for everybody that follows the New Orleans Saints. But you're right. We have fans everywhere, not only of the team, but of our particular show and the work that you and I do. You go to that Bayou Blitz that we talk about every week, that Bayou Blitz Facebook page, and you click on, and it's well over 1,400 members, and they are literally from multiple countries, and from so many different states that it would take me all night to list. And that by itself is just sobering. The people that follow what we do, support what we do, and give really stay involved. And that's what this is all about. I know that's why you do this. That's quickly how I figured out why I had so much fun doing this, is the interaction that I have with Saints fans, former Saints players, and the like. And this is just so much fun for us to do.
Yeah, definitely. Think about it, man. We've had the opportunity on the Bayou Blitz to touch guys and speak with guys like Jim Everett, Quinn Early, Willie Roaf, Mitchell, Kevin, and the list go on and on and on of Saints guys that are in lore of the Saints nation, and I've been a part of watching them when they were players, and now we've had time to have conversations with those guys, bond with those guys, have great relationships with them as well, and one thing that really touched me years ago was the fact that when the professor was still healthy, he went to an event and he was talking to some guys and he was telling those guys that, Saints News Radio does da 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 da, and the guy was like, "Hold on, wait up, you're the professor." He said, "Yeah," so and it was great to know that we've had an impact, and people who listen to us, we just don't know how many people we actually are able to touch out there in the world. So let's get it rocking. Let's get it rolling, man. Just like our boys in black and gold, I am ready. I'm pumped. Especially, I can't wait to give it to these Houston Texans. These guys in Houston, they're ready. They're kind of apprehensive about what's going on or what will happen to them when they come to visit us on Monday night.
Yeah, and let's start with Houston a little bit. First of all, this is not a team to sleep on, Saints fans.
No, it's not.
As I'm mentioning in my matchup pieces, this is one of the better rosters in the AFC, at least. They've won the AFC South championship 3 out of the last 4 years, including last year. But what's interesting about them, and you've alluded to it a couple times in the last couple of weeks, they have made a flurry of moves this preseason that kind of has you scratching your head. And it's a roll of the dice by Coach Bill O'Brien of Houston, whose teams, we mentioned that that they're fairly regular participants in the playoffs, but they have not won a playoff game, I believe, Kyle, under his watch anyway. So he might be feeling a little bit of warmth under that rear end seat of his. Do you think that that's part of the reason why they have made some of the moves that they have, particularly in the last 2 weeks?
Well, they had no choice. That offensive line is not performing well. If you looked at the first couple of preseason games, you had to be concerned what's going to happen with Deshaun Watson. Remember, Deshaun Watson led the league last season in sacks. I think he had 62. And that's a lot. That's a lot of sacks compared to someone like Breeze, who only had 10, something to that nature. 16, I think it was 16 with Breeze. So you have to really look at what could they have done. I think they made a mistake a few years ago when they let go now Seattle Hawks offensive tackle Dwayne Brown. And now they have Laramie Tunsil that they traded for with the Miami Dolphins, as well as Kenny Stills, former Saints wide receiver. But I think, Clemente was supposed to be that guy at guard, right? They drafted a young kid to be the offensive tackle, and just this preseason just showed that what he is a rookie. He didn't have what it takes to be able to protect Deshaun Watson's blind side. So Clemente now has been relegated back to the second squad because they moved the kid to guard. So I think when you look at Bill O'Brien, 6 seasons with the Houston Texans, he makes questionable decisions from time to time. He has been successful getting the guys to the AFC South championships, right? I think he's won like 2 of them or 3 of them. But it's getting them through that divisional round or the wild card round has been always the problem. And I think when you look at, it's just my opinion, I think he's a good coach. Don't get me wrong. I don't believe he needs to be calling the plays. That's my opinion. I think if he's actually going to give somebody the title of being offensive coordinator, he's probably better managing the game, but he doesn't do well managing inside of the game. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, and there's a lot to what you said. I've always kind of liked the Texans, as far as AFC teams go. Yeah, and I like Bill O'Brien even back to his days, his short stint as the head coach at Penn State when he succeeded Joe Paterno. But you're right. When you watch Houston, you do question some of that play calling. They have left their young quarterback Deshaun Watson out to dry. And we've seen it with Breeze in New Orleans when the Saints offensive, on those rare occasions when the Saints offensive line struggles a little bit with pass protection. Kyle, what's the first thing you do? You alter your game plan to get that ball out of your quarterback's hand faster. Not only so you can keep your offense, well timed, but to keep the health of your quarterback regardless of age. And that's, I think, the biggest mistake that O'Brien, where he has failed his quarterback in his offense, is he doesn't adjust very well or game plan to opposing defenses very well. They just go out and it's, to me, it's very basic, very vanilla, and he doesn't take great advantage of the skill position players that he has. And the Texans do have some talent at those skill positions, particularly wide receiver.
Sure do. And, DeAndre Hopkins is one of the premier wide receivers in the National Football League. You have Will Fuller, if he's ever going to stay healthy, is one of the more dynamic wide receivers. Think about it. Fuller, every time midway through the season, he gets injured, right? And at that particular time, he's leading the league up there at the top of the league in touchdown receptions. So that shows you the potency he has as a receiver. He can make an impact immediately with the big play. Deshaun Watson and he immediately gelled between the two of them faster than he did with DeAndre Hopkins. But I'm going to tell you this, man. The bottom line, when you look at Bill O'Brien, I know he has positive records of 42-38, 3 division titles. That's all good, well said and done. Just like Gary Kubiak, 8 seasons with the team. He had a couple of division titles, but the problem was with Kubes is that he didn't know how to be a game manager, right?
Sure.
And it wasn't until he had a quarterback like Mr. Peyton Manning that he was able to manage that effectively to be able to bring home a title for Denver. So, I'm kind of curious to see what Mike Detillier as well as Barry have to say about these guys as well. Do you think it's time for us to bring in Mike?
Absolutely.
All right, let's give Mr. Detillier a call and see if he could be able to share and enlighten us with his great knowledge of the National Football League, and I'm just going to say one other thing, man. When you look at these fans in Houston, and they have some really good, passionate fans. If I'm not rooting for the Saints, I'm rooting for the Texans. I'll be honest with you, man. But the thing is, man, you got to have guys who are willing to kind of change their game plan. And I know the Texans lost their owner, McNair, due to cancer, and his brother has taken over. But some of the moves that already Bill O'Brien has made as general manager are going to be questioned if they don't pan out to be successful. Okay?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And again, you look at that AFC South. There are some very competitive teams in that division, and it is sort of up for grabs. Indianapolis has an extremely talented roster. Andrew Luck's recent retirement, kind of has them in a tailspin, but they really, really like Jacoby Brissett, so much so that they just re-signed him, extended his contract an extra 2 years. So Jacoby's going to get a chance to prove himself as a quality NFL starter. Jacksonville has one of the better defenses in the entire National Football League, and now has brought in former Eagles playoff hero Nick Foles to quarterback that offense. In Tennessee that may not have the talent on paper that some of these other teams do. And Marcus Mariota, their quarterback, faces a make it or break it year. But Tennessee always seems to be competitive, especially within division games. O'Brien is really going to have to coach his rear end off, I think, this year to keep his job. I couldn't agree with you more.
He definitely will. Definitely is needing to be up to the task. Hold on.
Hello.
Hey, good evening, Mike. This is Kyle and Bob with the Bayou Blitz. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good, man. I'm glad you're able to join us this evening.
No problem. My pleasure.
All right.
Mike, this is Bob, and I echo Kyle's sentiment. It is always a privilege to get to spend some time with you and pick your brain. You and the family doing well, I hope?
Everybody's well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Good. So listen, hey, the first question I wanted to ask is the big move that the Saints made recently. Traded linebacker Vince Beagle, who was a good special teams player and was able to give the Saints some good pass rush off of the edge. But they dealt Beagle to the Miami Dolphins in exchange for Kiko Alonso. How do you feel about this move on the surface, and does that tell us a little bit about the health of Craig Robertson and or Alex Anzalone?
Well, I think there is something there, health-wise. You look at Anzalone, he was healthy last year, but I also can read the race form on him, that he's been down with injuries throughout his college career, early on with the Saints. And then it's been down since the Minnesota game. Basically, Peyton is telling you Robertson's going to be out. And as he put it, it's week to week. That tells you it's going to be a couple weeks. But, I think the big part about it is the big picture is that some people don't realize that Sean doesn't think like a fan. He thinks that he's trying to improve his team every day and looking for a player that can help him win a game or games. So it's obvious that the Dolphins are in a fire sale at this point. And I feel bad for Brian Flores. I really do. I got to work with him last summer. He came to Louisiana at the Nicholls State University and work at our Louisiana line camp. In less than a year, he's the head coach. But look what's going on there. They trade his best player away to the Houston Texans, and it was obvious to Kiko he wanted out. I mean, he saw the writing on the wall. This team is going nowhere. Get a chance to pick up a veteran player who has played multiple positions. He has started at middle linebacker. He has started on the weak side. I like his athletic ability. He's not a small linebacker. He's a big guy at 6'3", at 240 range. He runs the field extremely well. Very intelligent young man. Everybody that I have spoke to him that has either coached him or played with him will tell you just how smart and instinctive he is. Teams have picked on him like they do a lot of linebackers in this league. Throwing the ball at him. So he's been a little bit hit and miss there. But he wanted out. Look what you gave up to get him. You gave up a backup linebacker who's a special teams player to get a starter who last year led the Dolphins in tackles and has had over 115 tackles the last 3 seasons. And he's been healthy. He had some knee injuries sort of early, middle of his career. But, the last 3 years he's been healthy. He's been productive. And so, man, I'll go for that any day of the week. Now, they had to redo a little bit of the contract, but you didn't bring him here to watch, and he's a little bit athletic arrogant, which I don't mind. It's like Muhammad Ali used to say, hey, it ain't bragging if you can back it up.
Right.
And my thing about it is he ain't never been a backup in his life when he's been healthy. He's always been a starter. And so, yeah, you bringing him here to push competition for him to play. And you know what? My thing is, let the chips fall where they may. Somewhere during the season, you're going to need him if it's injury or rotational play or whatever, and you got him for a song. I mean, it was a guy you picked off the waiver wire. So I'm all for it. When you can get a player like that, that's been a starter, multiple position player, and will pick things up very quickly. Another thing, too, with it, Mike Nolan has always been a guy, and he's told us this in different interviews. If he's a star player, it's great he can play one position. But there are only a few star players in this league. Get me a guy that can play a couple. That's what I want. I want a guy that can be a multiple position player, and he knows assignments and, that sort of thing. And he knows the mental part of the game very, very well. And so that's part of it, too. I'm sure Mike, who's a veteran coach and has studied these linebackers, had certainly some say. And, man, you just look at the Dolphins. They've had, I think it's 12 new players since the end of the game Thursday night.
Wow.
We're talking about in a week,
yeah.
Less than. And, they've changed 12 or 53 men on the roster. So you can see why Kiko was, hey, tag me out. I want out of here. It's a great deal for the Saints, and it goes to prove my point with Sean, which a lot of people, oh, man, we too good. We too good. We don't need nobody. Come on, be real. The Patriots average 17 new players every year.
Yep.
Look the rings they got on their fingers. This year the Saints have 15 new players out of 53. Many people after the season, I want my team back. I don't want to change. No, you got to change. It's a commuter world, the NFL. And you're constantly going to have those changes on a roster. 4 of the 5 draft choices make your 53-man squad, and Alize Mack goes on developmental. You got 3 undrafted free agents, make your squad. So that's 7 rookies made this team, along with the veterans. 8 veterans made this team that you acquired in free agency. So that's a good overhaul of the roster a little bit. I was leaving the Dolphins game, and, we only got 2 elevators, so we stuck in line. And there was a scout behind me. He recognized me. We started to talk, and he was like, I'm going to tell you something. And he actually gave me my story for Sunday. Was that I'm so impressed with what Sean and Mickey and Arlen have done to retool his team over the last few years. A lot of young players here. And he said, and the national people don't talk about it. He said, I know you guys do, but the national people don't talk about what he's been able to do to get core players. And he just left it like that. I got back home, and then once the cuts got down, the Saints have 30 players on this 53-man roster with 4 years or less. 30 of the 53, 4 years or less. And look at the core players that have played in big games. We talking about Ryan Ramczyk, Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, Von Bell, who I think is a core player, Marshawn Lattimore, Sheldon Rankins, Will Lutz. All core players, 4 years or less in this league. So what you built up via the draft for the most part is, really good. And the fact that what's going to happen. Eventually, they're going to want to get paid.
Right.
So you're going to have to figure out a way to do this. But wouldn't you rather have that problem than the ones they've had for years when, come on, they didn't have that type of talent on this football team. There's still unknowns on this roster. We don't know if Traquan Smith can eventually be a number 2 receiver in the NFL. Because right now, he ain't done enough to knock out Ted Ginn Jr.
Right.
As far as I'm concerned, he ain't done anything to knock him out. Marcus Davenport, still a question mark on if he can become that big-time player or not. I think it's a lack of confidence in Marcus myself. I think they need a game where he needs to flush that out. But and they like Eli Apple, but do you want to pay him that kind of money? they've worked on his techniques in the offseason. Aaron Glenn told me that, he really worked a lot with him on just a little tweak here and there with him. So, that there's still some question marks. For me, it's in the secondary for this football team. But, man, you just look at the numbers. They don't lie. About 30 players, 4 years or less. Look, all the core guys that I just named off. 7, 8 guys, 9. Man, so you set up pretty well here. So when you can get a veteran player like what you could with Kiko, I want that. He can help me. Can help me win a couple games or a game. I want that. It's a difference between being a wild card team playing those games in the dome. So, man, I like the roster here. I think it's as deep and as talented. And, I'm old enough. I was a little kid, but I did see year one. So I knew that team, that team couldn't match this one. But you go back at some of the really good teams, if it's 06, 09, 2011, some of the teams that Bobby had, with Dalton and the Dome Patrol, it's as good on paper of that. So that's all you can go by. You can't go by anything else now because they haven't played a regular season game. But I feel good about this roster, and I like the way Sean takes that approach, that he is always looking to get better. Because I think they've had coaches here, I don't think it, I know it, that they talk just like a fan. Man, ain't nobody good enough to make this team. Mm-hmm. We don't need another receiver. We don't need another linebacker. We don't need another defensive back. Oh, yeah? When you get in the regular season, you find out what I tell people forever. Preseason is a mirage.
Yep.
Ain't nothing equates from preseason to regular season, team-wise. Now, you can see individual play, but team-wise, that's nothing to it. That's an old Buddy DiLiberto line he gave to me, but he stole it from Richie Pettibone. I don't know who Richie stole it from, but it probably was George Hallis or George Allen, one of those guys, because that's exactly what preseason is. It is a big-time mirage out in the desert, team-wise. But you can tell about individual play, and Sean gives them every opportunity. So I like the trade. I really do.
I have a question. I heard Pat Swilling today talk with Bobby and those guys on WWL, and Pat Swilling made a observation about Marcus Davenport. He believes that Marcus Davenport should be on the opposite side versus where he is today. He believes he doesn't bend as well to be able to get to the quarterback because of his size and what have you. What are your thoughts on his perspective there? And Pat, what can we say? Pat knows the game, especially knows how to rush a pass.
I certainly couldn't disagree with him, and he knows a lot more about it than I do. The one thing I see with Marcus, when he's a really talented athlete, he's a big, tall, cut guy. You don't see a lot of defensive ends that tall in this league anymore. There used to be. You used to see a lot of them, but not anymore. So it is going to be a chore. I don't care if you're left or right to bend the edge. Either way. So is he saying, I'm going to move Cam Jordan over to the other side? That's what he's hinting at, right?
That's what it seemed like from his conversation.
So do you feel comfortable moving Cam over to a new position? And it's different. We saw it with Andrus Peat, and he struggled so much. They tried to make him into a right tackle, okay?
Right.
He was a left guy, and we saw it. He struggled. They moved him to right tackle, right guard. He couldn't play. He was stiff as a board because he's been on the left side all his life. Now, all of a sudden, they shove you there. It wasn't comfortable for him. Soon they moved him to left guard. Different story. He's been a really good player when he's been healthy. So, I don't know enough about the dynamics of that and how would Cam feel about moving around. I do know about Davenport is the fact that he was a high school wide receiver. I talked to his college coach, Frank Wilson, who told me, Mike, I ain't putting him in one spot. That would be stupid on my part. I stood him up. I moved him left. I moved him right. I put him with his hand in the dirt. I stood him up like an outside linebacker. Why should I just put him on one side? Because teams are going to understand where to block him. He's getting used to that because he was moved all around in the college ranks. So now he's stationed at one spot. Pat would know a lot more about it than I would on that position. I think the deal would be, if that's the fact, how would Jordan feel about it?
Right.
Yeah. And I remember when LT first came into the league and those guys, Belichick, they was trying to figure out how to utilize him and his talent. If you have a guy as athletic as Davenport is, listening to what you just said about his old coach, it would make a lot of sense to be able to utilize his ability to be able to move around and be able to, come up the middle or have some games here and there where he's stunting, So I think that could be one of the things the Saints could probably key in on. Do you think they're just going to be too rigid when it comes to that
in preseason?
Oh, exactly.
I'm not showing you nothing. So, because my thing about it is they do watch those preseason games, so I'm not going to show you anything. If that's what my idea is, to fool with Marcus. I know in talking to Ryan Nielsen, Ryan's really praised him about his progress. I talked to Danielle Hunter because I think in some ways they are similar. When Hunter came out of LSU, he was a thin guy from the waist down. And he told me I watched a lot of film of what I missed at LSU. And he said I was close, but I would never get the sack. And so he said I worked with a guy that worked on developing my lower body. And that's where you get your power and your speed from. It's not about upper body strength and looking like Charles Atlas. It's all about getting that lower body power and that bend. I think he's gotten stronger in the lower body. What I'd like to see a little bit more with him, and it's difficult when you cut like he is, 'cause he's legit, 6'6" in a little change. It's hard to cut that edge hard when you're that tall. The one thing that you can see he's not used to a lot is catching blocks from different angles. But he was that way in college too. Just because they were moving him around, he wasn't as aware of where the blocks were coming from. So if I'm the Texans, which I don't think they're going to run the ball much, but if I run it, I'm running it right at him. I want him to prove it to me he can stop it. He's the biggest sort of mystery on this football team. And we saw him get off to the slow start last year, and then all of a sudden it got a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better, and he has a great game against the Vikings, and he gets hurt in that game. And, he tried to play on the injury, but there's still a lot of unknown about Davenport, and I got a feeling with their practice you didn't see in preseason. Again, because why would I show it? That was one of the things with the Giants when they had LT. They moved him all around. Belichick's correct. But put it to you this way, in that first year when LT played, they knew exactly where to put him at in game one, regular season. Because, man, the Saints played the Giants early in that season. All I can tell you is LT was all over the field. And, Bum had that comment right before the draft in 81. Well, I'm looking at the running back because, you can always run away from a linebacker. My thing about it is ain't none of them linebackers could run like LT could.
Sure could.
Man, when he stuck that foot in the ground and he took off, he was, holy hell, running the field. And so, there's different ways to do it. And, again, it's almost sometimes I live next door to a coach, a former NFL coach, and he always tells me, hey, you know what it is? When we were growing up, you go to school and they teach you multiplication. Like you said, now today they do that all on that cell phone. Because, what the teacher told you back then, you won't have a calculator all your life. Well, yeah, I do. I do today. But
yes.
Some people can pick up that multiplication real quick, And he said, some people, it's a little slower. It's rep. And he said, some people kind of drag with it. And finally it clicks. But he says, you know what? It's like that in players too. Not everybody gets it right off the bat. And he says sometimes you find somebody who never gets it So, he said, that's 4 levels of this, of how it runs. Again, he's the biggest mystery of what's going to happen with him. Nobody can tell you, oh, he's going to be a bust or he's going to be a star. You just haven't seen enough to say one way or another. One thing he hasn't been this preseason was productive. And he was going up against some second-string guys. That, I think, is the most disappointing thing.
Mike, when you were running down the list of all the Saints core players that had 4 years or less of NFL experience, you kind of touched on a point that Kyle and I debated on the show a few weeks ago, and especially in light of the Zeke Elliott contract signing today. I wanted to ask you, where do you think the Saints' next contract focus is going to be? Is it going to be on an Alvin Kamara or a Ryan Ramczyk or
Von Bell?
What do you see him really focusing on?
I think it's Von Bell. I look at this football team. Somebody debate me that Marcus is a better player than him.
Nope.
Nobody going to debate you on that. Marcus was a good rookie player. He didn't play up to that level in his second year. And, man, all I know is, Von Bell, he was the most improved player they had on defense a year ago. And you look at what he did in preseason when he did play. Great against the run. They blitzed him off the edge. Coverage. He got it. So, my thing is, I get it. He's in a contract year. So what? He's in a contract year. That dude can play. He's a core player for your football team. And he would be the one guy that I would focus in on today, because I still have a little bit of time with Alvin. I still got a little bit of time with Ramczyk. Now, by the summer, then it's all going to be about Alvin. And you can say, well, I don't know about paying a running back that type of money. My thing about it is, look how the Saints use him, not only as a runner but as a receiver. And when they need to, they put him back there as a return man. So, the game has dramatically changed. That, at one time, running backs were some of the highest paid players. Now, they're at the bottom of the barrel, so to speak. With Gurley and Le'Veon Bell, and certainly with today with Zeke, that's an exception to the rule. Well, so will Kamara. But the ability to catch the football, like a receiver, in this style offense is huge. And so, put it to you this way, I doubt by the end of next summer, Zeke still is the highest paid running back in the NFL.
Wow.
Now let's get to this season. And everybody, and rightfully so, I don't think you're going to find many people not put the Saints at the very top of championship contenders. Who else do you see that are right on par with them at the top of the heap, for lack of a better term?
I think Rams, Eagles in the NFC. Okay. I'm a big Doug Peterson fan. I've known him for a long time. And he's pieced together a pretty good football team out there in Philly. And they believe in him. A beat-up team like what the Eagles were last year in the secondary and in the running back core. Look at the game they give the Saints in the Dome.
Yep.
Come playoff time. Listen, they had a shot late. They had a shot. So it's all going to depend on the health of Carson Wentz. But they're strong up front. And I do, and I'm sort of like that in college football too. Let me see the lines, offensive, defensive lines. You look at the Eagles, they have one of the better offensive lines in pro football, 2 really good tight ends in Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert, and their defensive line is pretty stout too. You can't be great everywhere. That's just not how it's set up to be. But if Wentz stays healthy, they're going to be there, and so is the Rams. A well-coached football team. Sean McVay has done a really good job of controlling a lot of different personalities on that team. And I think that they're a team that can get better offensively with progress from Jared Goff, getting back Cooper Kupp healthy. Gurley's got some issues with the knees, but they have a good they got a good backup there. Offensive line is, certainly a pretty good unit for them, and defensive line. They got the stud I mean, Aaron Donald is who he is. He's the best player in the game on that side of the football. And their secondaries, it's above average. And the linebacker core, most people couldn't name you, but they pretty solid there. And they have other pieces with a Michael Brockers, a Dante Fowler, so they're going to be in there. They got a good kicking game also. So I think those three teams, Eagles, and along with the Rams and the Saints, are in that bunch at the top. And if healthy, I think the Falcons could push. Again, though, they've had a rash of injuries too early on. So, I don't know, but I do know that team was really good when they were healthy, when Devontae was healthy, when Debo Jones was healthy, when their secondary was healthy. They were a pretty strong team. And I do know one thing, that coach is on the hot seat, because you got starting to get an owner that he ain't used to being told, 7-9, 8-8, losing in the playoffs is good. He wants something more than that. And so I think if they're healthy, they'll be in a bunch there. But I do think the Eagles, Rams, Saints are the cut in the NFC.
Let's go to the AFC, and especially with the opponent that we're going to see against the Saints in the Superdome, the Houston Texans. And I'm here in Houston, Mike. The Texans fans are a little antsy, so to speak. O'Brien hasn't really gotten them over the hump where they need to be. What do you think about his performance and where this team could possibly go this season?
I think he's a solid coach. He's not one of the top 12 head coaches in the NFL. And now he's quasi-general manager, which is never a good situation either. But, they get a premier player in Laramie Tunsil, who is a lot like Teron Armstead. I mean, he's that good, and he anchors that left side. But you spent two of your top three picks on tackles, and now they've been moved inside the guard.
Right.
So, the big key is you got to keep Deshaun upright. And, Bobby and I sort of debate this. And listen, I don't disagree with him that Deshaun holds on to the football a little too long at times. But, man, if I'm getting that type of pressure, good gracious, I got to be on the move.
Right.
They're not blocking him well. And then, you lose Lamar Miller. So now what do you do at running back? You brought in Duke Johnson. Is he going to kind of carry the load for you? Or you trade, you get Carlos Hyde, who's been okay back, but nothing special. You got, arguably one of the best receiver in the NFL in DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, just an unreal talent. If he was playing in New York or Los Angeles, oh, good God, they would be gushing over him every week. But he's playing in Houston. It's different. Will Fuller's a really good player when he's healthy. Speed guy, tremendous foot speed. And bringing in Kenny, who I think is a pretty good slot receiver for him. Some of the distractions off the field. Listen, I don't have anything, and I'm all for a player if he's, he wants to put in for a cause off the field. That's great. But you got to understand, too, you have a job to do on the field. And so if he's not distracted by that, I think he's a really good player. Saints, Texas, to me, look like an over game. Look like I don't think either defense are going to stop one another. I think it's going to be up and down the field.
Right.
I think where they took the hit was with Clowney. People don't realize, if you watch the game sort of as a scout, you see how good of a run player he was. He came out of South Carolina billed as this great pass rusher, and he was very good, and he was dangerous coming off the edge. And he's been a good pass rusher in the NFL. Not an elite one, a good one. Mm-hmm. But where he's really played well is against the run. Man, if I'm the Saints, I don't care who's lining up in his spot, I'm running the football right at him because he's not going to be as good as Clowney. Their secondary, Drew Brees is going to go after them throwing the football. Because, every year it looks like 52 pickup. They bring in guys in and out, in and out, in and out. They lose Matthew. And so, they've dealt the cards all over the place. Still, J.J. Watt, I think, is still a tremendous football player. And they're good up front. But I think their secondary is leaky. I do think you're going to see a shootout Monday night between these two teams. Deshaun and DeAndre are going to put up some numbers too.
Right.
And DeAndre, to me, always reminded me of a little bigger version of Antonio Brown. Now, he's not as flamboyant and he don't beat his chest like what Antonio did, but there's a lot of similarities as a route runner, the ability to set you up and get separation downfield. And so, man, he's a load when you got to cover him. So, man, listen, I think this comes down, and the Saints' history, history does tell you a lot about the present. This football team has struggled to get out of the blocks. They have not won an opening game since 2013. And that does, kind of weigh on you a little bit. They've been okay after that, but almost the first game is a stumble. It's not a run. And so I think this is a high-scoring game, and I think both teams are going to be in the 30s when it's all over with.
I agree, because I was watching the last time the Texans played a regular season game in the Superdome, and that was a shootout. So
I agree with you. I think it's going to be a high-scoring football game, and whoever has the ball last, I wouldn't be surprised it's a walk-off field goal. To win it, because John McClain, and he's covered the league longer than I have, which is really saying something. John's done it for like 44 years.
Oh, John.
And he gave me a stat. He said, Mike, when Deshaun Watson has been a starter, they've not lost a game. When they lose a game, it's by 7 points or more. They've never lost a field goal game.
Wow.
So he said, when they win, but when they lose, it's by more than a touchdown, which he said, in this league today is a lot of points. People, blowout. And every once in a while you see a blowout game. But, most of these games are real tight, it's 6 points or less. And he brought that up about Watson, and, I was like, okay, I get it, because we were talking about kind of and he sort of agrees with me. If Saints win this close game, a field goal, and his deal is, I think they may be winning by a touchdown. And I asked him why, and he said, well, let me give you a stat. And he threw that out there that, Watson, since he's been a starter, the games they lose, it's been by a touchdown or more. So, right. Interesting.
And I know for a fact that Watson has brought these guys back in games from major deficits, but the defensive secondary has been always kind of leaky, like you said,
Suspect.
And let them down. Right. Speaking of secondary,
and two is I don't think they're going to run the ball as well this year. Well, I don't think Lamar Miller's a great back. I think he's a good one. I don't know that Duke Johnson and Carlos Hyde will be able to run the football as effectively as what Lamar. And my thing about it is you're shuffling the offensive line again. You got a rookie left guard who you spent a first-round pick for. You thought he could play tackle, and he couldn't, so they moved him inside. Tunsil will come in, and it'll be a pretty quick pickup. But one thing about offensive line play is 5 guys working as one. So, you got a rookie left guard. You got a newly acquired left tackle. The continuity is not quite there. So I think if you catch them, you're catching them at the right time. Early in the season, where that continuity up front may not be as good as, say, Week 8, when they played a number of games together.
You mentioned continuity, and you've touched on the Saints secondary a couple of times yourself. And I see the two having a correlation because we saw this New Orleans secondary struggle big time coming out of the gate last year. Before they played, I thought they played a lot better down the stretch. Is there a lot that you see out of that New Orleans starting secondary to raise a red flag with you about this team's contending chances?
I think it's, again, the game's not built for secondary people anymore. I talked to Aaron Glenn about it. He said, man, Mike, I don't know. They're making this game a lot more difficult for us in the secondary. All the rules basically have been set up for the pitch and catch game. Listen, to say that the NFL doesn't know about fantasy football is a myth. Come on, they know all about it. I can't tell you, people, ladies, and I want to call them old, but, people in their 70s and 80s, they'll text me or send me a message that, hey, my grandson is in a fantasy football league. Can you give me a tip? This is what I'm looking. So, it's brought in people that you would have never thought in the game, not pulling for a team, they're pulling for players.
Right.
Yes.
They pulling for their own fantasy league players. So it's interesting how that's come about. And I think Aaron's right. I really think he's right about this, that, it's built for the pitch and catch game, especially early in the season when you maybe don't see the pass rush as good. And he brought that up to me, that I said one difference I see from when I played, you had defenders game one, they were putting heavy pressure. He said today it's not as much. He said, but to be honest, they don't have as many really good pass rushers today as when he played. And I think he's right about that too. I think 7-on-7 has changed everything. And while most of those guys are playing on offense. So I think there's a correlation there. When you don't get as good a pass rush, you can't cover forever. And these receivers, man, they churn them out every year. So, that's a concern. But you know what? I can basically kind of say that about every team. That, that's early on because you're not getting as good a pass rush. And the receivers, I think the pitch and catch game has an advantage. Years ago, I couldn't have said that. I always thought the defense had the advantage early in the season. But I don't think that's the case anymore because you can practice it. Defensively, how the hell you teach people how to tackle or cover? Now, you can do a little bit of that and the drills and all. The thing is tackling, angles, that sort of thing. I don't know how they do it today when you don't practice it. You go to practice, it's kind of like pajamas and slippers, two-hand touch. You ain't tackling nobody. How you expect? So what you see early in the season in September is a lot of high-scoring games. By October, the defense got it.
Right.
They got it. They figured it out. And those games are a lot closer. They're not as high-scoring, that sort of thing. So, we ain't living in Papa's world anymore. We living in our world of football. And it's changed. And so you have to change your mindset and understand what's going on back there. But to your question, I do think that there's a correlation that I think early in the season last year, they didn't get as good a pass rush. Once the season cranked up, their pass rush was better. Their secondary played better. And also to the addition of, I think Apple was an upgrade there. They picked on him, but why would I throw the football at Lattimore? The only team that picked on Lattimore was the Steelers because they had him head up against Antonio Brown. Wow. Man, I ain't stupid. I'm throwing the football to Antonio. I know he's going to find a way to get open. That's nothing against Juju Schuster and those guys. But my thing about it is Brown is such a talent that, I'm going to throw the football at him. And he was terrific against the Saints. That was the one game Lattimore got picked on quite a bit, and he spun him around like a top a few times. Yeah. Listen, sometimes they got your number. But I do think there's a correlation. Earlier in the season, not as good a pass rush. So what happens is you hang in your secondary out to dry. And that's why I think Fitzmagic has looked so well. That, early in the season, these teams don't get as good a pass rush. Secondary play is not as good. He plays great. By week 5, he's sitting on the bench watching.
Mike, let's talk about the Saints tight end situation. I know we have 2 guys on the roster. We have Dan Arnold as well as Mack at practice squad. Do you think one of those guys get elevated, or will it bring Derby back? Or I know they brought in a couple of guys for tryouts today. Do you see Sean going into this football game with only 2 tight ends?
Well, I think part of that is because of the suspension of Onyemata, that you got to keep an extra defensive lineman. So I understood that. And, in the pinch, because I did a couple of events with Taysom here on the Bayou, and, and he brought it up to me that, hey, listen, I'm going to play a lot of slot receiver this year. Yeah. And I was like, okay. This was back in June. He tells me this. So I think he had already been told, hey, listen, get ready that you might play a little bit of flex tight end. We'll stand you up and see what you can do. Now, again, for Taysom, it's just learning how to run a route and, the setup downfield and everything else. But I think certainly for game one, you're going to see just two. Cook is a great addition if he's healthy. I mean, God's blessed him at his age. At 32 years old, he can still run.
Yeah.
He's a big target guy, sure-handed, runs with the ball well after the catch. And Drew's always had a great correlation between tight ends and himself. Goes back to Gates, and then you think early on, it was with Shockey or David Thomas or Jimmy Graham and Ben Watson, and now it's going to be that way with Cook. I think if Jared's healthy, he's a 75 to 85 catch receiver on this team. He's that good, and he's really going to make a difference short yardage red zone where you have a mismatch downfield with him and a linebacker. So, I like what they got. You know what Josh Hill is. I mean, he's a really good special teams player. He's a really good in-line blocker. He's okay in the short, middle range area to feel as a receiver, but he ain't breaking nothing. Cook's the guy that can do it. And they've spent a lot of time in work with Dan Arnold. Just listen to how Sean talks about him. He likes Dan Arnold, and he thinks somewhere along the line he's going to have a shot. Now, with Alizé Mack, I think he's a young man, extremely gifted. He's got all the physical skills in the world. It's between the ears. How much will he, mentally, gain what has to be done? Because you see sometimes, Sean get all over him in practice because he didn't run a route right. A little bit more focus with him and some maturity with him. But they like his long-range talent, too. So I think early on, because of not having Onyemata in the lineup, and you need another defensive tackle, I think in a pinch they would put Taysom in that kind of like a flex tight end. But I expect that they'll probably make a move to bring in another tight end just because of how much the Saints use three tight ends on this team.
Mike, who are your picks for the conference championships and your ultimate Super Bowl prediction for 2019-2020?
I think it's Eagles-Saints in the NFC Championship game. I think it's a repeat in the AFC, Chiefs-Patriots. So I'll go Saints-Patriots, Super Bowl.
All right.
I picked that last year. I came close. I mean, it was as close as you can get without picking it right. But still, until the Patriots, somebody knocks them out, why would you pick somebody else? I know if you're a gambler, I understand that you're trying to get a little better odds. The Chiefs, to me, got to prove to me that when you get down to that critical game, you can beat Belichick and Brady in that spot. And I think, Eagles, Saints, to me, I think they're the two most talented teams in the NFC. They both have great coaches, and I think that would be one whale of a matchup. But I think the Saints end up winning it, and I think it'll be Saints-Patriots in the Super Bowl. And so instead of, Miami Vice, it'll be Miami twice for the Saints. I stole that from Mayberry. He steals stuff from me, so I can take that.
I like that. I like it.
I actually feel a little bit privileged. Both your conference championships were the same as what I had in my season preview article. But I rolled the dice. I picked the Chiefs over New England, and my reasoning was because someone has to beat Belichick and the evil empire eventually, right?
I've said that for a few years too, but nobody has. And again, we saw the Broncos were able to kind of clip them and that sort of thing. But man, again, he's the greatest coach of our lifetime, and there's no ifs, ands, buts, and maybes. People call him a cheater, and my thing about it is, if he's cheating good. You think about, with Paul Brown and Lombardi and Tom Landry and Chuck Noll and Bill Walsh, they did not have to deal with free agency. Pretty much their team stayed intact, on those squads. And look at what happened with Parcells once free agency really hit, he wasn't quite the same coach. There is something about that continuity with him. And, to me, what he's done is remarkable. They've changed coaches. They changed assistants. They changed players. And yet they're still there. It's something about just the way he has handled that is, we're going to be writing books, Well, I won't be alive 50 years from now, most likely. But, we're talking about Nick Saban and Belichick. We're watching the two coaches of a lifetime in what Saban has done at Alabama and what Belichick has done with the Patriots. In our lifetime, we are not going to see anybody eclipse what those two guys have done. And so they're going to be writing a lot of books about it. And I see HBO's got a special on them, too, in December. So it's interesting. They've already kind of, jumped the shark on that. They understand what you're looking at today. You're looking at something special.
Yeah.
But those other coaches were great coaches, nothing to take away from them. But they didn't have to deal with the commuter world of assistant coaches and players like what you see today. And, when you talking about changing your roster of 17, 18 new players every year, it's remarkable that he wins. And I think once Brady retires, Bill will continue to coach because I think his ego tells him, I'm going to show you I can do it without Brady too.
Yep. I believe that as well. Hey, one thing before you get off, Mike. Your old pal Rick Gailey used to always tell me, say, Kyle, special teams have to be special. And we know we have special guys in Morstead as well as Lutz. Do you think this kid Harris could be special as well?
I spent a lot of time with Rick at those Saints camps, and we would talk about that a lot. And, they finally fixed the kicking situation. It was a revolving door there, and Sean got no patience with kickers. I mean, he's like me today. I mean, I got no patience with anything. But he didn't have any with the kicking game. And finally he got Will Lutz. And, after a little bit of a kind of a rocky start, and it wasn't all Will's fault, but, he's become a premier kicker in the NFL.
Yep.
To think about, he has started his NFL career, and he's more accurate than Martin Anderson.
Wow.
Yep. Martin's sitting in the Hall of Fame. When I told that to Marty when we had him on, he was like, Mike, you did them numbers right. I said, oh, yeah. But he knew it. He knew it already. And because he's worked with Will.
Oh,
and
wow.
So, I think that you've got that part done. Their coverage units have been pretty good. It's always been about the return game, which has not been the same since they dealt off Darren Sproles. I see Deontay. I saw him in college at Assumption, and I was like kind of everybody else. Let's just see how you can do that against the big boys. And you know what? The big stage wasn't too big for him. With Sean, I think he's more concerned about how well he handles the punt securely. And I watched him a lot in practice, and he did have a drop here and there, but he was pretty consistent catching it. Now, Sherrills, when he did practice, he didn't drop nothing. I mean, that was the one thing with Marcus. He didn't drop squat, nothing. But, man, he's got some special skills out in the open field. That ability to make the first man miss, find the seam, and then get open. I talked to my old friend Clarence Verdun. Clarence grew up in Houma while I was on the Bayou. We both the same age. And, I'd asked him about what makes a great return man. He said, you got to be fearless. You got to be, at this stage, fearless. That make a catch, and you see an opening. And he said the deal is make the first guy miss, and then have great eye vision. The ability to see that seam and take off, and have that burst to take off. And then he said, then you got to kick it into another gear. You got to be able to pull away from people because they have sort of angles on you. So you got to be able to kind of pull away from that. And everything I've seen with Deontay tells me, you know what? He might be what Will Lutz was as a kicker. Now, I got to see a bigger sample size of it because he has not played in a regular season game. But, man, he's something special. They play two different positions, but he has a lot of Sproles in him. And I think that's what made Darren so special one, you could never get a good hit on him, because they listed him at 5'6", 5'7". Come on, he wasn't close to that. He's a 5'5" guy. But how do you get under him to tackle him?
Yeah.
But he had that ability, vision-wise. He could make the first man miss, but the one thing that made Darren special was his field vision. And he had that ability to find that spot and get open and make a move, and then, poof, he's gone. I think Harris is he's got better speed than what Sproles did. But that's a lot of similarities to them as a return man. And so I just hope he catches it, because, man, the one thing you want to get on Sean's list, you're on the list, buddy, is drop one and see how that goes, because you might be unemployed real quickly in that department. Because, again, I think he's got no patience with that in his career. Just like as a kicker, he's got no patience in the return game. Come on, your first job is to catch it. If you can't catch it, then everything we do to block, to set things up, is skewed. You can't do anything unless you catch it. And once he catches it, man, he's something. And I think early on in the season, it's one of the things, Greg McMahon, who's now at LSU, told me this. He said, you kind of look back over the last 5, 6, 7 years. One of the things you can chart, there are probably more punt returns brought back in the first 4 or 5 weeks than, say, the last 5 weeks. He said the reasoning is those special teams have not played as a unit together. They got different people with different units. You might have a first-team guy with a third-string guy, and that guy's selling insurance today. And so he says, it's just a continuity of taking the right angle, making the tackle. And so he said it's kind of a version of defense that you're not practicing with the same guys. That first team, special teams, you didn't know that until the final cut. So how can you practice with it? And I think Greg's right about that. I think it's difficult. It's easier in the college game because you sort of know who your guys are going to be on special teams. But in the pros, there's a lot of flip the cards. And so I'm interested to see that part of the game with Harris. And can he break one early? Because I think it goes back to what Greg says. You see a lot of that early in the season, and about 5, 6 games, okay, they got it now. They work as a unit. And he says on the back end, where you can make a big return is you got an injury. So the guy who's playing on special teams is now a starter, and you got to replace him. How well that guy does on special teams. So, but man, Harris looks special to me as a return man, and God bless him. If he can make a difference in a couple games and take this team from 6, 7 yards a return to 10, they've done their job. Anytime you can get 5, 6 extra yards or 4 extra yards for Drew, you've done your job.
Right. I know Coach would always say 6 to 7 yards is the key. 6 to 7 yards, Kyle. So, all right. Well, hey, Bob, any last questions for Mike?
I could talk to you. Well, I could listen to you all night, Mike. I know football season for you is 13 months out of the year. But between
You're about right.
Between the outstanding work you do in your college and pro football coverage, I mean, there's nobody equal to you. I just want to thank you for taking some time out, with Kyle and I tonight.
That's kind of you. I appreciate it. Now, spring break's over for me.
Yeah.
It ended about a month ago. Yeah, spring break is over for me. I'm like a school teacher. My season ends sort of mid-May, and, so I got off a couple months, but then, they want you to write this article and that article and do this and do that. And so but it's not like every day where you're doing like today. This is my 13th show.
Oh, wow.
Oh, God.
If I would call it, radio podcast, this is 13 for me today. So, you get used to it. It's not a sprint. It's a marathon. And so, but I'm used to running a race. I'm glad I ain't running it anymore because I ain't in shape to run it anymore. But I do know how to do this part real well.
Mike, you mean you're not going to go for the ESPN body issue? I can see you and Bobby with the body issue.
Well, listen, if they got him on there, I can do it. But Coach O, he always teases me about, man, when you were younger, he was so skinny. He said, you ain't had no six-pack. You had a 12-pack. That was nothing on the bone on you. He said, man, that stomach, but now it's a little bit different story. And the funny story is he goes to California. He's on vacation. And, sure enough, he goes lay out on the beach. He said, I ain't there 10 minutes. He said, man, I hear that. Hey, comment ça va, Coach? He said, man, I look up, and it's a guy from Golden Met. He said, who would have thought? Here I am in Malibu, California. And the first dude I meet, he's renting a house right next to where we rented. He's a guy from Golden Meadow, Louisiana. He said, what the hell chances of that? So the guy said, listen, Coach, could you take a picture with us? He's like, yeah, but he said, let me go get my shirt. So I told him, I said, no, you falling into the same thing as us. He said, no, I don't want no shirtless picture of me. He does run the levee sometime with his shirt off, but we all at that stage today. But no, if Bobby's in the issue, I'm in it too. Believe me.
Yeah, I'm right behind you guys. I have a keg, not a 6-pack or 12-pack. But anyway, Mike, it's great to have you on as always. Thank you for everything, and hopefully we can have you back on somewhere during the season, and hopefully when we make that Super Bowl run.
Yeah, listen, anytime, guys. I appreciate it, and thanks so much. I appreciate the kind words, and need me, you know how to get in touch with me.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
For sure.
Thanks, guys. Y'all take care.
All right. And now we have Mr. Barry Hirstius, the man from Harahan. What's going on, Barry?
Kyle, how are you, my friend?
Good. Man, we're jumping from one pro to the next. What's happening?
For sure.
How do I follow Mike Detillier? Come on. And look, and he gave you guys so much good information. So, maybe we'll just cover the Texans game coming up here in a couple of days, because I've been writing a lot about that the last few days. So maybe we can explore the matchups, or discuss that. But man, Mike is the best, and it's just how do I follow that, man? Just phenomenal stuff.
Yeah. Look, man, let's talk a little bit. I know, Barry, you and I, we've been knowing each other quite a while, and I know you've been a part of the Saints News Network, and even when you were over at Big Easy, Believer, or what was it that?
Big Easy Believer, Who Dat Dish,
and all those guys.
With Bob's boss now, John Hendricks, who's at Canal Street Chronicles now, but when he ran Who Dat Dish, and I used to write for John there. So
okay, so here's my question: when are you going to be in the body issue too, man?
Oh yeah, well. Yeah, that came and went years ago.
Man, if people, I'm harping on that because if you haven't noticed or heard yet, Michael Thomas is representing the Saints in the 2019 ESPN body issue for the magazine. So that's why I'm harping on that.
Well, not a bad choice.
I know the ladies love that. The ladies gonna love to see it. So.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, guys, let's kind of wrap up the show and let's talk about the matchup, like you said. And I think that's a good one. Barry, this is for you. J.J. Watt. I think losing Clowney is going to give him some, because Clowney took up some of the other needs to kind of double team from time to time. I noticed this last season for the Texans. Now the pass rush focus will be solely on him. How many sacks do you think that he can possibly get against the Saints on Monday night?
Well, he's going to be going up against, I guess that's going to be Warford right there probably. It just depends on where he lines up, because he can line up on either side. But I'm gonna assume he's gonna be matched up on that right side, which he would draw either Warford or Ramczyk. because I mean he can come off the edge, or he can actually slide in sort of to the interior. But if you recall, a couple of years ago, he blew up our good friend Zach Streif, who handles the Saint.
That wasn't fair.
Radio,
that wasn't fair at all.
Destroyed him. So, destroyed him. So, look, I know JJ's been hurt. I know he's not the same guy. I think he's north of 30 now, if I'm not mistaken. But look, this is a guy who's still been an NFL defensive MVP, and I'm sure you guys caught the article I wrote the other day talking about the dysfunction junction with the stuff going on with Texans head coach Bill O'Brien, and as Kyle was just discussing the Clowney trade, but all that aside, this is still a dangerous team, and I didn't mean to sell them short the other day. I think somebody. Or a lot of Saints fans thought I was selling them short, and that was the title was a little misleading. Yeah, they are having a lot of issues off the field, but that's just been because the head coach is also trying to be the general manager at the same time, and he's a disciple of Bill Belichick. I heard Mike talking about Belichick and the Patriots earlier. O'Brien is a disciple of Belichick, but. So when you see a lot of similarities in Sean Payton to Bill Parcells, I don't see those same similarities between O'Brien and Belichick. I don't get that sense. And he's a good coach. Don't get me wrong. And I'm speaking about Bill O'Brien, the Texans head coach. But, he's a good game planner, a brilliant offensive mind. His success throughout his coaching tenures at both college and pro, impressive. But that said, playing general manager is a little bit different, and it's hard to do both. It's hard to do both. Technically you could argue that Sean Payton does it, but I think Mickey handles a lot of the front office stuff. Sean's more about personnel. Player personnel decisions. Mickey's more about contracts and handling the money and the cap and all that type of stuff. But, I just think that Bill O'Brien is clearly out of his element. That said, all that aside, though, I didn't mean for that to get twisted. This is still a dangerous football team. Deshaun Watson is one of the best young quarterbacks in the game. They have probably one of the, if not a top 3 wide receiver in DeAndre Hopkins. Will Fuller, the number 2 receiver, is healed from his ACL injury. He's looked great in camp, according to O'Brien, and he's going to be going one-on-one against Eli Apple, one of Kyle's favorites there. And look, Eli has had his moments. But he's also had some trepidation there a few times, I believe, in the Chargers game, as Kyle was quick to point out to me off the air one time. So, those are I think Lattimore will be fine on DeAndre Hopkins. I think they might cancel each other out because they're both, supremely talented individuals, in their own right, respective rights. But I would think Fuller has an advantage over Eli Apple. That would be my concern, and I know that would be yours, Kyle. That would, to me, if there's a matchup to watch in this game defensively for the Saints, it's definitely Eli Apple one-on-one with Will Fuller.
Well, one of the matchups.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But one of the matchups that I know he doesn't have many packages that may be thrown his way just coming into the team due to the trade is Kenny Stills. Because the person that was a QT, the wide receiver for the Texans, he got injured during preseason. I think he's out with an ACL injury as a result. But Deshaun Watson was relying on him with those intermediary throws, right? And I think that's where Kenny Stills could possibly help him out because, Kenny still can ball a little bit. And also Kenny, if I'm not mistaken, he has had more big play ability than most of the wide receivers in the whole league. I think he was number 2 behind, forgot the guy.
Yeah, I think he got 16 and a half yards a catch or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm concerned about because sometimes we know the secondary can get kind of lost in the Superdome lights.
And we've seen a PJ Williams or a Patrick Robinson struggle. That's not far-fetched at all. And I believe it was a week ago for us at Saints News Network, I wrote that the Saints were going to have their hands full with that Texans wide receiver core. You say what you want about their dysfunction off the field, but they're going to come into the Superdome trying to steal. I said it this morning. They're going to try to steal a W, and I know it sounds funny, but it's true. Because nobody's giving them a chance to win this game. The Saints are a 7-point favorite. Yeah. That's a solid 7 points. If you take an over/under, you go take the over. So but this Texans team, you can't sleep on them. That's all I'm going to say. And even though, the stuff off the field. And that was what the article that I wrote the other day. I was just saying that it could be a distraction. It can be a distraction because when you're and Kyle, you live there in Houston, so you've heard a lot of it.
I'm gonna say this:
when you constantly get that in your ear and told how dysfunctional, even though the players play, ultimately players play and coaches coach. You can't tell me that's not affecting them and creeping into that locker room, and that was all I was suggesting.
Yeah, I'm gonna say this:
show up and play a heck of a game.
But Barry, I'm just gonna say this one thing. I think the only major concern that Houston has at this particular time is how they're going to handle the loss of Clowney and how they're going to handle the loss of Lamar Miller.
Yes.
Whether you liked Lamar Miller or not, this guy was close to 1,000 yards last season like he did the previous season, but it was only due to injuries that kind of shortened his ability to get there. And he had an Alfred Blue to kind of back him up. This year they got rid of Foreman, who they drafted, right? And now they're with Duke Johnson due to the trade, and now they also have Carlos Hyde that they just brought in today. So the team is going to be a little bit uneasy there, and how they're going to handle some of the pass protection is going to be an issue for that team. Also because, they go to the shotgun quite often with Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
All right, guys, let's kind of speed things up. Bob, any questions there, comments about what you think we're going to see as far as some of these matchups?
And the matchups across the board on both sides of the ball. Mike Detillier a few minutes ago highlighted them very well for us, like you pointed out, Barry, and that's kind of why Mike expects a shootout. But it's interesting because the way the matchups line up on both sides of the ball, it seems like there is a lot of strengths versus weaknesses. And what I mean by that is, Barry, you talked about the Texans receiving core. And there's not too many people that have a trio that's more talented than Hopkins, Fuller, and Stills. And they're going to go up against the Saints secondary that has concerned us through the preseason and definitely with their performance out of the gate to start last season. So that matchup is going to be, one for the highlighter. And then, you jump on the other side of the ball, and it's the same thing. The Texans notoriously are weak along the offensive line, and look especially so, right now. The strength of the Saints defense is in that front seven, and I think that they're going to be able to put pressure on Watson, and they're going to have to, because just like you guys pointed out, the Saints secondary certainly has some talent. You can't deny that. But with the way the rules are set up, you can't expect these guys to hold their man-to-man coverage for long. So they're going to have to get to Watson, force him to hurry throws, or maybe force him into bad decisions, or to make a play on the move. Because the Saints have to shut down the run to start. I agree with what Mike said earlier. I don't foresee the Texans having a run-heavy game plan, not with the way this roster is set up. But the Saints have to prevent Houston from having any success whatsoever on the ground to make them one-dimensional, and then turn those pass rushers loose. And I think that's where this game is going to be won or lost. Like you kind of pointed out a second ago, Barry. J.J. Watt, and don't sleep on Whitney Merciless. He was a very, very good pass rusher before they got Clowney, and then they kind of changed his role. Well, I sort of
put him back in that old role.
Yep, exactly. So I sort of expect Merciless to be in that role, opposite J.J. Watt. So don't sleep on him. Teron Armstead and Ryan Ramczyk are going to have their hands full. I doubt that you're going to see much single-team blocking on Watt. But Barry, you pointed out how the Saints really struggled against Watt. It made Zach Street look like a ordinary off-of-the-street Joe instead of the team Hall of Famer that he's ultimately going to be. And even though Watt isn't that same player, he's still a difference maker. And you have to keep, do you guys expect, and this is for both of you, do you guys expect the Saints offense to come out with a real quick rhythm passing attack to sort of set the tone before they establish the run? How do you feel that goes?
Yeah, I can see that. Also, I think another thing that's going to be overlooked is Jared Cook. I really think he's going to be a huge part of this game plan. And I just think people were sleeping on this kind of, everybody talks about Kamara and Michael Thomas, and Mike was there, and certainly we got to see it, and you guys saw it on just for yourselves. I mean, he just tore up training camp. Granted, he's 32 years old. He is a little prone to getting dinged up at times. I've noticed that about him now. And our good friend Alan Ulrich over at the Under the Dome podcast made that observation to me a few months back, and lo and behold, he called it, because that's exactly what's been happening with Cook, and that's why he didn't play in that last preseason game. He was a bit dinged up, and they were just holding him out as a precaution. But look, when he's rested and he's healthy. Look, he's 32 going on 22, and I'm telling you, they're going to sleep on that guy, and he's going to have a huge game. It's just a gut feeling I got.
Well, I don't know anybody but Jonathan Joseph in the Houston defensive backfield, and I'm not belittling any of those guys. I just don't know them. I knew Kareem Jackson. Yeah. And I knew the other young guy, Jackson, they had opposite of Joseph, but they got rid of him. So I think their defensive backfield is going to be on skates. And you saw the rhythm that Drew had in the Jets preseason game. I think you're going to see a lot more of that, Bob, when you talked about rhythm. So, the pressure is going to be on them often and early, and I think the Saints need to take advantage and kind of test them out from time to time to see if they're going to respond positively against the Saints attack.
I personally would like to see Trey Hendrickson have a big game. That's another guy who had a strong preseason, and that's somebody who I think I was telling you about a matchup to watch is Eli Apple and Will Fuller. Well, a Saints player to watch on defense, for me personally, would be Trey Hendrickson. Right. I think that kid's got a lot of potential, breakout potential. I think you saw some of that in the preseason, and if he can put that effort into the regular season and have a few big games here or there, hey, I know we've been expecting a lot out of Davenport. Don't be surprised. Don't be surprised if T-Rex sneaks in there and winds up splitting 50-50 at the worst. I'm not going to suggest he's going to take Davenport's job away from him per se, but don't be shocked if you see T-Rex get a lot of snaps if he can replicate that success that he had in the preseason and let that carry over into the regular season, I think the kid's got breakout potential and can become a star.
Yeah, and I think also, and I watched the Texans linebacking core with Merciless and McKinney. Merciless has one of the best names for a defensive player ever, right?
Oh man, Bernardrick McKinney.
And now you add
him, Kyle. You might recall, Kyle, the article I wrote on McKinney. I compared him to Vaughn Johnson.
Right, right.
He can play.
He can play. And now you add Mingo from LSU to the mix. You guys, they got a pretty good linebacking core. So a lot of pressure on the Saints' running game is going to be right there because those guys are pretty quick. I know Merciless and Mingo. McKinney at times he can get caught up in traffic, but I think it's going to be a test, man. It's going to be a test for the Saints, all in all. Look, it's the start of the season. Everybody believes that they can win. That's how I look at it, guys. And I made a mistake. QT I thought he was more seriously injured than they let up on, but he has been practicing, and there's not an official report yet on the team, but there's a possibility he can play from what they've been saying. So I was kind of shocked after seeing the hit and how he went down in preseason. Okay, guys, what's your prediction for the game then, Bob?
For the game, I think the Saints are going to put some points on the board. I very, very much respect Watt and Merciless and their ability to bring pressure on the passer. I love McKinney and Zach Cunningham and the linebacking core. But I agree with you guys. I think that secondary can be had, and I can see the Saints coming out extremely aggressively and setting a rhythm early. Defensively, I think New Orleans can and will put heavy pressure on Deshaun Watson, and that's going to create a couple of turnovers. I think the Saints are going to win this one, and it might look like it was an easy win on the scoreboard, but it's going to be tight through three quarters before they start to pull away. I'm going to go with the Saints taking this one 35-27.
Okay. What about you, Barry?
Well, guys, I don't know if Bob is throwing a stat out here because being the great host that he is, he's usually got the great numbers and little stats that he throws out. But the New Orleans Saints, for those who aren't aware, if Bob hadn't already covered this, have not won a regular season opener since the year 2013, which is when they beat the Atlanta Falcons in the Superdome on that last-minute interception on the goal line. I believe it was by Roman Harper against Tony Gonzalez.
Yep.
So we're talking, how many years ago was that? Kenny Vaccaro was a rookie, as I recall, in that game. So, you look, they've lost. They've been 0-5. They're 0-5 in their last 5 season openers. I think the streak finally comes to an end. I agree with Mike Detillier. I think it's going to be a shootout because, as you alluded to, Kyle, they can't run the ball. I mean, Duke Johnson's been there a couple weeks. I mean,
he's been injured.
He's decent. Carlos Hyde actually will probably be the leading rusher in this game, I think.
Right.
But I totally agree with you. I think Deshaun Watson's going to come out slinging, but I think he's just going to get outslung by the master slinger, and I'm talking about Drew Brees. And I'm going to go Saints 38, Texans 28.
Wow. Man, you kind of had similar numbers to me, man. I had 38 as well. But since you had similar numbers to me, I'm going to go 41.
Wow.
I think it's going to be a high-scoring game, man. 41-32, something to that nature. Saints take it in a thriller in the Superdome against the Houston Texans. All right, guys. Before we get on out of here, and before I send Barry and Bob on to start writing some more incredible articles for the Saints, we got to say to our friends who have been affected and their families who have been affected by Hurricane Dorian. You're in our prayers. I know
Yes.
my good friend Dale, his family down in the Bahamas, is pure destruction. The island that I spent some time on in Freeport is something that you never thought you would see. Same thing happened in New Orleans. Same thing that's happening across the world. We have to be thankful for where we are and what we have with the people that we have and love in our lives each and every day. Also, guys, I have to say this. Be very, very, very much in prayer for our Saints News crew, our families, extended families as well. We have such a great young talent on board, and I appreciate guys like Mr. Barry Hirstius and Mr. Bob Rose. But over the past 10 seasons of leading the Saints News Network, I am very fortunate to have many, many great acquaintances and to see careers kind of blossom from there. So what we are considering on Friday night is to have the Saints News crew get back together a little bit, a couple of the alums as well as ourselves, to kind of talk about the network and the direction. I think it's going to be first part of a couple other shows, and we're going to have some articles about the network as well. And I appreciate everything that you guys have done. Barry, thank you for taking the reins and to be able to help write that article as well. All right.
Sure.
And let me see. Don't forget, guys, that we have there was something else I wanted to tell you. Oh, thank you, Mike Detillier. Thank you for being with us tonight. That was great. You always can find Mike at Mike Detillier on Twitter as well as Instagram and other places in this whole world, right? So,
and specifically WWL AM New Orleans Radio.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Barry, how can people find you on the World Wide Web?
They can find me at Saints News Network on Twitter, or at it's Big Easy /mag, which is www.bigeasymagazine.com, and of course I do both. So. And that's where you can find me, or you can just find me specifically on Twitter at Barry Hirstius.
All right. And Bobo, how can people find you on the World Wide Web as well?
Well, first of all, I want to double down on your thank yous. Thank you again, Barry, and thank you to Mike Detillier for joining us tonight. Always a privilege and an honor to work with both of you. And as far as following me, first of all, I gave everybody an open invitation to question my sanity when I published when I published my always popular wink wink nudge nudge NFL season prediction article, which I came out with yesterday. And going to be just like Mr. Hirstius, going to be previewing the Saints Texans matchup tomorrow and through the rest of the week. But my work can be followed through the Canal Street Chronicles, available on Facebook or Twitter at Saints CSC. If you wish to follow me personally, first of all, I want to thank you in advance for that honor. I can be found on Facebook, Bob Rose, or Twitter at BobbyR2613. And I try to work as closely as I can with those writers. So I definitely work closely with the writers at Canal Street Chronicles and their outstanding editor, John Hendricks. But also work pretty closely with Barry and Kyle. I learn a lot from you guys every day, so I want to thank you guys. And please, if you haven't already or you know someone that would like to follow our Facebook group page, Bayou Blitz, just look up Bayou Blitz on Facebook, send Barry, myself, Kyle, or any of the administrators a join request. I promise you, we're privileged to have you with the family. And give the Bayou Blitz Twitter page a follow as well, at Bayou Blitz 412. We're still building that one up. Got some work to do, but it's the season, so everybody's going to want to read and hear and listen to football coverage. Am I right, gentlemen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Look,
Yes.
Just chime in real quick before we go. What you've done with this podcast is phenomenal. Because when you first started, I don't think anybody even heard of it. You know, it's like, who's this Bob Rose guy? And I said, oh, he's great. You just haven't heard about him yet, but you will. And brother, you've delivered, time and time again, and you've made your mark, and I'm so proud of you, and you're just doing phenomenal work, and I know John Hendricks is very proud of you as well, and just, but not only just with your work with the articles, but the podcast, because I mean, like again, I don't think anybody even heard of the Bayou Blitz. And here you are, year 2, and it's just become a huge thing. And that's a credit to you, I guess, like Mike Detillier at night, or former Saints players like Joe Horn and Jim Everett, and just all the then you get players' dads and and siblings and all this. And I'm like, man, how did you get that guy? I'm blown away by it. And I'm like, man,
thank you.
And people are noticing. And I'm sure, and I know Kyle's got to be proud of it too, because it makes Saints News Network. It's certainly building the credibility. And just once again, my compliments to you.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot, my friend. I appreciate it.
Yep, definitely. All right, guys, Saints fans and Who-Dats from all over the world, don't forget you can follow us at www.saintsnewsnetwork.com, or you can go to www.saintspodcast.com and listen to all the podcasts around the Saints and Who-Dat Nation, especially this one with the Bayou Blitz. All right, Barry Hirstius, my man from Harahan. Thank you, man. Appreciate you.
Anytime, my friend.
All right, and Bobo, tell Will I say hello, and Lauren.
Will do.
All right, guys. You can find us on the air. We're going to be on the air airing on Friday night around 8 o'clock p.m. as well. And we will have the Saints News crew back to you. All right, Saints fans, let's go for it. Let's root for our boys in black and gold on Monday night, baby. Who dat? Take care. Bye. We out.
Who dat?